Jeon-shun is a very intelligent boy who is focused only on his studies, which is why he practically has no friends. On the other hand, his classmate Yoonbin is also intelligent, but he has a more active social life. He has many friends, and that's why he can't beat Shun academically. Besides, he was a bully and took advantage of the weaker ones. That's why one day he wanted to mess with Shun, thinking that he was weak and wouldn't be able to defend himself. But he was one of those people who never bowed his head, so he tells him to be careful. This makes Yoonbin angry and he wants to hit him. But right at that moment, some baseball players show up looking for a guy named Suho, because according to the captain, he had flirted with his girlfriend. He answers that that's a lie, because she's the one who keeps looking for him. When he hears this, the captain wants to hit him, but Suho was an excellent fighter and manages to defeat the whole team without much trouble. After the fight, he had thrown Shun's things, so feeling guilty, he picks them up and apologizes to him. Later we see that Shun's father was an excellent athlete, and his mother was very intelligent. But his parents were divorced, and he lived only with his father. That's why he worked so hard at school, so his mother would be proud. The next morning, he arrives at school early and finds Suho stayed over. That day, they had PE class and he had clase de educación física. Su stayed at his father's, but he fell asleep. Because of that, he has to run in his regular clothes, and that's how all the problems would start. Bin and his group make fun of him because he's not in good shape, but Suho shuts them up and tells them they're not good either, and since he was stronger, no one says anything to him. Then Shun knew that they had hidden his uniform, so he tells them again not to mess with him. But Yoonbin's friend grabs him by the neck and body. He wants to force him to beg, but he doesn't give in and doesn't lower his gaze even in danger. Luckily, a teacher arrives and calms things down. Time later, we see that Shun was just spending his time studying, but suddenly someone knocks on his door. It was Seo Suho, who worked as a delivery man and had gotten the address wrong. Still, he confidently enters his house and asks him for a glass of water. The next day, his father found out he had hidden his uniform, but the friend was a friend of a congressman. In Yoonbin's case, Yoonbin grabs Soo and stays to sleep with him. But they had sat down with Seung's friend and grabs him by the body, telling Yoonbin's friend grabs him by the body. He keeps saying not to get involved with him, telling them not to get involved with his friends, planning how they could, but he kept repeating it, but the friend grabs him by the body. Y tishiun porque kinadolo kia a e amparecie asustarlo, to scare him. So they want to hit him where it hurts the most. That is, in his studies. So they call his cousin to get them some drugs. Their plan was to make him do badly on an exam, so that way they could break him once and for all. That they used Bonsok, since he was bullied at his previous school. And Yoon Junbin told him they would do the same to him if he didn't help. So he puts a fentanyl patch on Shihun. In the middle of the exam, he starts to feel dizzy. By the time he realizes it, it's already too late. He tries to hit himself to snap out of it, but time had already run out. When he checks his answers, he only had one mistake. This makes him furious, and he goes straight after the person responsible for all of this. He beats Yoon Junbin savagely. His horrified friends can't do anything. And just as he was about to finish him off, Suho arrives to stop him. He tells him that's enough. But Shihun replies that he still hasn't learned his lesson. So he also wants to fight Suho, but he was the best fighter in the class, and he manages to stop him without much trouble. Luckily, a teacher arrives and stops them before things get any worse. As a result of the fight, Yoon Junbin had a broken nose, and his mother wanted Shihun to be expelled, but he tells her that the one who should be expelled is her son for bringing illegal drugs to school. When he shows her the evidence, the lady goes silent and agrees not to report Shihun because her son would end up worse off. The next day, Yoon Junbin's friends wanted to get revenge, so they challenged him to a fight after school. But he replies that it's better to do it right now, so they go to the school bathroom. Yoon closes the door, but he didn't want to fight. He just wanted to use a psychological trick to scare them and stop them from messing with him. The trick works very well, and Shihun ends up as the weak hero of Class 1. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Yoon Junbin calls his cousin because he wanted to hire him to teach Shihun a lesson. On the other hand, he and Suho had become closer friends. After their fight, they started talking more and spending more time together. The whole school thought they were best friends now. Because of that, Bonzo wanted to get closer to Shihun, but he tells him not to try to get on his good side. But when he left school, Yoon Junbin was waiting for him, along with a group of bullies. They took him somewhere else to beat him up. Bonzo sees this and quickly runs to tell Suho, but he doesn't want to get into trouble. So Bonzo tells him that he'll pay him for helping. Suho agrees and they quickly go out to look for him. Meanwhile, Shihun was being beaten up, but he was very clever and quickly comes up with a strategy to defeat them all. His plan works, but Yoon Junbin's cousin was very strong and quickly gets up to attack him. Then Yoon Junbin loses his temper and wanted to break Seong's hands. Luckily, Seong Suho arrives to help him. He tells the thugs that that's enough, but Yoon Junbin's cousin didn't agree. So he starts fighting against Seong Suho. Both were good fighters, but Seong Suho was better. Meanwhile, the other thugs beat up Shihun. Luckily, at that moment Bonbonzo also shows up to help him. Seeing how cowardly Yoon Junbin was, his cousin gives up and says the fight is over. So he leaves and lets him stay with his friends. Shihun wasn't resentful, so he just tells him to stop and to forget about all this trouble. After the fight, the three new friends go to eat, but before that, Suho tells them they have to help him at work because he was late for helping them. So the three of them start working at the place, and after finishing everything, they can finally eat. During dinner, Bonzo apologizes to Shihun, and he accepts his apology. Then Suho feeds him, and Shihun spends his first afternoon with his friends. On the other hand, the bullies who beat up Shihun weren't actually that bad. They were just victims of another bigger bully who forced them to commit all kinds of crimes. When he sees that one of his boys was beaten up, he decides to take advantage of it and purposely breaks his arm to ask for money as compensation. The next day, the boys get together to relax a bit and let the blood circulate. But Shihun couldn't go a day without studying, so he wanted to leave. Bo tells him to bet to see who is better. After beating him, Shihun says goodbye to them, but on his way home, he runs into the henchmen of the bully who hit him. She grabs him and asks him to take her out to eat. Then she tells him that tough guys like him are her type. In the end, Shihun doesn't understand what's going on, but he still had a good time. The next day, Yoon Yunbin goes to school to pick up his thing. Before leaving, he begs Shihun to accompany him to the parking lot, supposedly to make a statement that the fentanyl wasn't his. But it turns out, it was all a trap. The boss of the thugs had planned everything. He tells the guys that for having beaten up Yevon, they have to pay him 15 million won. Otherwise, things will get really ugly. If they don't give him the money, they'll have to take out a loan, and that would be much worse. This was the super shady way of the thugs. All his guys borrowed money, and since they couldn't pay it back, they ended up working for him in the end. The next few days, the gang members kept chasing them. So Shihun gets tired of it and talks to his new friend. She tells him all the bad things about that organization, and she asks him, for his own good, to pay the money and not get involved with his boss, who's a psychopath. For his part, Bonsok had stolen his father's watch. That's how he got the 15 million won. His friends don't agree with that, and they ask him to return the money because they decided to call the police. That's how they'll solve the problem, because he knows that if they give them money, they'll probably ask for more. Also, Shihun tells him that he already has a plan in the criminal's house. There's all the evidence they need to take him down, so they have to make them take them there, and then bring the police. So Suho tells them that he'll go first, and when he gets to his house, they should send the police to make the gangster trust him. He tells him that he already knows about his gambling app, and he presents him with a proposal to improve it, and to turn the whole school into a gambling house. The boss of the thugs agrees, and he agrees to let him join his group. Then the girl gives the address to Shihun, but Bonsok thought it was dangerous, so he goes after the thugs to give them the money and put an end to all this trouble. Meanwhile, at the criminal's house, he didn't believe a word Suho said, so he hits him from behind. When he checks his phone, he finds out that Shihun was going to come with the police, so he orders everyone to gather everything they can and run away immediately. But before they leave, Bonsok arrives. He wanted to give him the money, but after what happened, it wouldn't be enough anymore. When arrives with the police, there was no one in the house. So the police thought it was a joke. And they tell him to call them when it's something serious. But he wasn't going to give up that easily. So he goes into the house and discovers that there was no evidence anymore. Luckily, at that moment, his friend calls him and she tells him that they will go see the boss and she'll send him the address. So he must make sure to bring the police with him, because if not, they could all lose their lives. When he arrives with the boss, Sok begs and tells him to finish all of this once and for all. The boss doesn't hesitate and gives him a good beating, but Yoongi tells him to stop, so the boss ordered his henchmen to finish her off. But that's not all. He asks the youngest one of them to kill them, because he was still a minor and they wouldn't send him to prison even for killing 2 people. Then he also wanted to finish off Susuho, but Seok Sokbek stands up and challenges him to a fight. If he wins, he'll be the new boss. The thug accepts and a brutal fight begins. Seeing that he's losing, the thug grabs a knife and cuts Su Sokbeg. Seeing this, Jong Yongi steps in and threatens the boss with a knife. He tells him he won't do anything and quickly takes the knife away from him. But before he finishes her off, some sirens are heard, and with them comes Shihun. He tells them that the police are coming and that it's better for them to leave. Then he frees his friends, and just as they were about to leave, the thugs come back because Shihun had tricked them. He had just set off a simple alarm. After that, they start fighting again. He uses that chance to escape with his friends, but luckily the police arrive, and with a warning shot, they stop the fight. But the boss wasn't going to go down that easily. He uses one of the guys as a shield, and then he runs away. Shihun goes after him because he knows that if they don't stop him now, he'll come back for revenge at any moment. When he catches up to him, he tries to fight him, but the boss was very strong. Luckily, Suho arrives too, and he asks the thug to surrender peacefully. Then the 3 of them start fighting. Although Suho was very strong, the boss of the thugs was more skilled, and he almost finished him off. He manages to recover, and both of them manage to knock him out. For his part, Sokbeg turns himself into the police so his friends can escape. At night, the police had all the evidence, and they arrest all the gang members. Shihun and his friends also reunite, and later at the station, Shihun and the others give their statements. But mysteriously, they are let go without needing to call their guardians, on the condition that they don't say anything. All of this was thanks to Bonsok's father, since he was a very important congressman. He ordered discretion to protect his political career. Then they take Bonsok to the criminal, and the secretary tells him that his father ordered him to take revenge. But the secretary shows him how to hit. Even so, he can't do it, and he leaves the room feeling very dizzy. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Shihun and his friend go to visit Suho. Suho tells them that he's fine, and that he'll be discharged in a day. Then she tells him not to see her so much because she's dating Shihun, but he tells her that's not true. Then when he gets home, there was no one there, so he goes back to the hospital and brings food to his friends. Suho tells him that he's scaring him because it's not normal for him to be so nice, to which Shihun responds with a smile. Meanwhile, poor Bonsok was being beaten up savagely. It turns out that the congressman was not his biological father. He had only adopted him for his political campaign. That's why he treated him worse than an animal. The next day, Bonsok had become very popular at school because of the rumor that they had caught some criminals. Then, when his new friends tell him about Jonggi, he feels replaced. And when he checks Susuho's Instagram, he starts to feel very jealous. Then he finds out that Susuho's birthday is coming up soon, and she wanted to throw him a party, but he tells her that it's not necessary. As the day goes by, Bonsok feels like Jonggi is taking his friends away from him because the 3 of them get along very well. When they go to karaoke, Bonsok tries too hard to get them to like him, which has the opposite effect. That's when he runs into his former classmates, and since they used to bully him, he quickly runs away. When he gets back to the others, he gets really angry with Jonggi because she had talked back to the bullies and gave them his address. He wanted to hit her, but his friends take her side, and that makes him even angrier. Then the bullies arrive, and they want to take Bonsok. But Shun tells them to leave and to stop bothering him. The next day, Bonsok was really irritated and wanted to take it out on anyone who talked to him. But the kids in his class weren't afraid of him because he wasn't strong. The one who was strong was Suho. Still, he wanted to hit them. Then Suho comes to calm him down, but he also gets angry with him. He doesn't go to school for the next 2 days. Because of that, his friends get worried and go to look for him at his house. He's really surprised, but he was happy that they came to visit him. When asked about his behavior, Bonsok explains he was bullied a lot at his previous school. And he couldn't do anything because his father had forbidden him from making a scene. When he hears this, Suho tells him to call the bullies because he'll make them apologize to him. When they arrive at the karaoke, the bullies don't want to apologize to him and threaten to beat him up again if he keeps insisting. But Suho stands up for him and forces the bully to apologize. But that wasn't enough for Bonsok. He wanted revenge and to beat him up. But his friends tell him that's going too far. Bonsok was acting crazy and Suho takes him out of the room. Then they start arguing and Bonsok tells him they're not friends. He offers him money to beat up the boy. Because of that, Suho attacks him and Shun has to separate them. Then Bonsok goes his own way. Then the bullies from his other school were following him. But meanwhile, he ran into his classmates. And instead of bothering him, they take his side. And not only that, but they help him get revenge on those bullies. When they're done with them, they include him in their group and they take him to drink at a nightclub. Bonsok buys the drinks, and that makes the other guys treat him with more respect. They also start following each other on Instagram, and that makes him feel like they are his real friends. The next day, Bonsok arrives at class drunk, and when Shun asks him what happened, he ignores him and goes off with his new friends. Later, Shun and Suho confront him. Bonsok tells them that they never considered him a friend, so he won't consider them friends either. Then he goes to another party, and at that party was Yunbin. He tells him that now they can be friends because they have a common enemy. Meanwhile, as Shun was leaving class, he runs into Suho. He takes him to work so they can spend more time together. Shun was worried because he felt that Bonsok's new friends were taking advantage of him. Suho tells him that Bonsok is the one taking advantage of them because that way he can feel popular. The next day, Bonsok changes seats and Shun threatens his new friends so they'll stop taking advantage of him. Suho tells him that you can't help someone who doesn't want your help. Then the new bullies wanted to cut in line at lunch, but Suho orders them to get in line. Everyone except Bonsok listens to him. He thought he was above everyone else, so Suho has no choice but to hit him. Because of that, he wants to get revenge. But since he was weak, he knew he could never beat him. So they hire Junbin's friend, a fighter who would soon go pro. He offers him 1,000,000 to take care of Suho, but his former friend had already beaten him before. So to give him an advantage, Bonsok and his friends cut the brakes on his motorcycle, so he would get hurt and not be able to fight well. Suho knew he was behind that accident, but so Shun wouldn't worry. He decided to act as if he didn't know anything. Sometime later, it's his birthday. That was the day Bonsok and his friends planned to beat him up. He calls him, but Suho had him blocked, so he decides to call Yoongi. He tells her that he wants to make peace with the guys, and he wants to give Suho a gift, but he wants her to help him. She agrees because she wanted everyone to be friends again. But it was all a trap. Then they send a message to Suho, but Shun sees the message first, so he deletes everything and tells his friend to eat while he solves some problems. When he arrives, he starts to analyze the place, and he will make a strategy to escape without any problems. Then he goes to the thugs who weren't expecting him. So Bonsok asks him to leave, but Yunbin wanted to finish him off. Shun starts to run, and he uses his strategy to get rid of most of them. But in the end, there were too many of them. Even so, he manages to defeat them, and when Yunbin begs for mercy, the fighter arrives, and everyone stands behind him. Since he was very strong, he knocks Shun down very easily, and when Yunbin wanted to hit him, Bonsok stops him and tells him that he has nothing to do with this. But his new friend tells him to decide whose side he's on, so in the end, he lets them hit him. After the brutal beating, Yoongi had called the police, so everyone runs away from the place. When he wakes up, Shun was badly injured. Yoongi was telling the police everything that happened, but he tells him not to say anything. Afterwards, he calls Bonsok and tells him he won't press charges, but he asks him to end this once and for all. The next day, his father asks who beat him up so badly. Shun tells him that he fell down the stairs. His father, worried, tells him that he will transfer him to another school. For his part, Suho had started to worry, because Shun, the most studious boy in the school, hadn't gone to class. So he goes to his house, but no one answers. This makes him even more worried, so the next day, Bonsok's friends tell them they have to pay for the damage to his motorcycle, and scared, they say yes. That's how he catches them. Then he beats them all, so they'll tell him everything that happened. When he finds out, he goes to ask Jung-gi which hospital his friend is in. She tells him that he was already discharged, and not to do anything stupid, because Shun sacrificed himself so he wouldn't fight. Then he goes to his friend's house. He tries to act like nothing happened. But Suho went to say goodbye to him, because he was planning to go fight the thugs. At night, he contacts Bonsok and tells him he'll give him what he wants so much, so he calls his fighter and tells him it's time to defeat Suho. At the same time, Jung-gi calls Shun and tells her that Suho already knows everything, and she's worried that he might do something foolish because he didn't go to work and isn't answering his phone. When Shun hears this, she stops studying and goes out to look for her friend. For his part, Suho confronts Bonsok and apologizes for hurting his feelings. He also asks him to apologize to Seung Shun, but he tells him the same thing the boys who bullied him said, that he has nothing to apologize for. That is to say, he became the very thing that made him suffer so much. When he hears this, Suho hits him, but the fighter comes to the rescue. He tells him that he'll be his opponent. Once in the ring, both proved to be excellent fighters. His fighter was about to go pro, so he had more training. Also, Suho was still injured. Even so, he manages to knock him down. But when he was about to finish him, one of the thugs interferes, and Suho takes a hard kick. After that, Bonsok gets in the ring, and he hits him savagely in the head. Then the other thugs get in the ring, and they beat him up cowardly. Secretary arrives, and he stops the savage beating, but Suho was no longer breathing. When Bonsok finds out about this, he feels terrible and he starts crying like a child. He wants to call an ambulance, but his secretary is taken away by force. Then they come back because they can't leave any loose ends. So they tell the two thugs that they have to take the blame. House, his father tells him that he must leave the country as soon as possible, and that he can't leave the house until then. The next day, Seung Shihun arrives early at school, but he feels strange not seeing Seung Suho. They had final exams that day, but because of his worry, he gets a low grade. Then he finds out everything that happened. Seung Suho was in a coma, and Bonsok's secretaries offered to pay all the medical expenses. In exchange, his grandmother had to sign some documents so she couldn't report them. Seeing his friend in that condition, Seung Shihun felt very guilty. After spending the whole afternoon with him, Jung-gi tells him to go home because he still had more exams. But Seung Shihun wasn't thinking about that anymore. He wanted to avenge his only friend. The next day, he goes to Yunbin's school, and when he sees him, he attacks him with all his strength. He forces him to tell him where the fighter they hired to beat Seung-ho is. Suho, since Yunbin was a coward, he tells him the whole truth. He also shows him the video of how they beat him up. At the same time, Jung-gi goes to Bonsok's house to tell him that he's a coward. But he tells her that all of this is her fault. If she hadn't gotten between the three of them, none of this would have happened. Back with Shihun, he goes to the gym where the fighter was. He wanted to attack him from behind, but the fighter had very good reflexes and manages to dodge him without any problem. He also tells him that he's too weak to fight him and that he'd better go home. But Shihun was determined to take him down, so he starts fighting the way Suho had taught him. At first, it doesn't help much, but Shihun was very smart, and he always found a way to defeat his opponents. When he manages to knock him down, the fighter begs for mercy, but Shihun wanted revenge. So he destroys his ankle, and with it, his career. Meanwhile, at the school, Bonsok's father had gone to make sure no one said anything. And since the teachers were corrupt, they played along. But in the middle of the exam, Seung Shihun arrives and starts hitting the bullies with a fire extinguisher. When he's done with them, he goes to Bonsok and tells him that all of this is his fault. He admits that he's right. and he asks him to hit him. But in the end, Song Si-hoon doesn't do it because he knows that the guilt from his actions will hurt him more. Then the teachers try to stop him, but he breaks the glass with his hand and tells them to leave him alone. Song Si-hoon was devastated. Then he goes to Ho, and since he was very tired, he falls asleep. In his dreams, he talks to him, and he tells him that he's really crazy. Seung Si-hoon apologizes to him, but his friend tells him it's not his fault. Sometime later, Bon Bon-seok is sent abroad because his father didn't want him around anymore. Jung Yong-gi, for his part, felt very guilty, so he also disappeared from their lives. His father wanted to blame everything on Seung Si-hoon and send him to a reformatory, but since there was a video of everything that happened, he had to agree to cover it up. And they transferred Seung Si-hoon to another school in another city. The only school that accepted him with his record was Jeon Dong Yondongpo School. On his first day, his new school seemed like a fight club. But even so, he was willing to start from scratch. But his classmates didn't want to cooperate. One of them looks for a fight with him, and Seung Si-hoon was willing to give it to him. And that's how this story ends. Remember that next week, the second season will be released, and we will be uploading it to the channel. Thank you very much for watching the video until the end. I hope you enjoyed the summary. If so, I invite you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any summaries. See you in the next story.